Today we're talking about the best decks and the metagame from the 2nd Regional Open in China in Chengdu, attended by 512 players. Draven is becoming a big problem in China. I don't know if it's gonna be the same in Bologna or in Las Vegas, but what I can tell you right here is that in Chengdu, we had less Dravens than in the first one, Fuzhou, and yet the conversion rate to top 64 was higher. So let's compare it to Fuzhou. In Fuzhou, we had 183 Dravens, so almost 36% of the entire field was Dravens, which is a problem in itself when a meta gets so homogenized by one character. We had a similar situation in Star Wars Unlimited, where Boba Fett was overshadowing other leaders and had to be banned at some point. Some could argue that it was banned too late, or some different guards could be banned, but completely different topic. Now in Fuzhou, 40 of those Dravens went to top 64, which is, yeah, it is bonkers. That's 22% conversion rate to top 64, right? Only 24 other decks were non-Dravens. And now let's compare it to, in theory, a healthier Chengdu, where we had significantly less Dravens overall, with 29% of the entire field. That's 7% less than in Fuzhou. Only 148 of Dravens were attending. But then take a look at the top 64. 37 of them actually converted. So 1 out of 4 decks that were bringing broth from Dravens was actually in the top 64, and that is a big problem. The conversion rate jumped by 3%, which is pretty significant at this level, right? When it comes to Dravens alone, even though there were less in the field. One of the reasons why Draven is so popular is because the deck has an incredibly high skill floor, which means that even if you are new to the game and you're picking up the deck, you're gonna decently perform because the cards are just so powerful. But at the same time, it has a pretty high skill ceiling, which means that you're gonna put in the hours to actually perfect your play with Draven, and then at the same time, you're gonna min-max the list. And I can tell you that the lists were definitely not really great when it comes to the previous tournaments, that there's still space to evolve, right? Then we can have even higher finishes. And I feel like this is one of those steps when it comes to the performance of Dravens. The players that didn't really like the gameplay, even though they like the power level, might be falling to other decks, but the players who stay with the deck are gonna be performing even better. So that's why the conversion rate is higher, even though the population is lower. And then when we change from top 64 to top 62, it even becomes even more apparent, where Draven actually converts to 23 players out of 32, which means, which is kind of ridiculous, that in the entire top 32 there were only 5 legends present: 23 Dravens, 2 Victors, 5 Irelias, 1 Ezreal, and 1 Fiora. That is problematic, and that is definitely being looked at by Riot, I can tell you that. But I wanted to go back to the top 64 and talk about the other legends for a moment. So Leona converted it with 25%, which makes it as broken as Draven, right? Right? Yes, of course. I mean, that were only 4 Leonas, so, you know, good job, Leona. Irelia overperformed when it comes to the conversion, went from 66 to 13 in the top 64. Then we had Annie from 2% to 16%, which at such sample size, like, it doesn't really matter how many of those decks are converting, because the sample size is just way too small to matter at this point. So we can say the same about Seth, Lucian, Rek'Sai, which all delivered 1 of the deck from out of like 10 and 9 to the top 64. 22 Victors went to 2 Victors in the top 64, but then both of them actually went to top 32. We had 1 Sivir, 1 Azir out of 17. Now this is like significantly worse than the other decks, and now we be actually going into this area as well, like 1 Ornn out of 19, 1 Ezreal out of 21, 1 Fiora out of 26. Let that sink in, right? Fiora was actually pretty decently popular in this event, and only 1 went to top 64, and only 1 that 1 Fiora went to top 2. Now, but let that sink in. Kai'Sa, from 39 decks, converted only 1 to top 64, and there were 0 Kai'Sas in the top 32. Master Yi, 0 conversions. Rumble, 0. Lux, 0. All of those decks are like almost 2 digits, right? 13 Master Yi, 9 Rumbles, 9 Luxes, 8 Misfortunes, 0. 8 Aris, 0. 7 Darius. Okay, that's not a Okay, this is not a surprise. Yasuo maybe should have converted at least one, but there was 7 and 0. Jinx 7-0, Timo 6-0, Renata 6-0, Jax 6-0, Lee Sin 4-0, Volibear 4-0, and then I don't know what this is, but it's 3 and 0. Anyway, there was not a single Garen even in the entire tournament. But overall, this tournament is slightly unhealthy, I would say, and there should be people looking over those results and thinking what can be done for the future of the game. But now let's talk about the entire top 8, and we have a deja vu when it comes to the first two places. It's a Draven and Fiora exactly like in Fuzhou, and there are similar decks, although there are significant improvement in the deck building as well. Third place is an Ezreal, pretty spicy build, very happy to see this one here. Fourth is Draven, fifth is Irelia, sixth, 7 and 8 is a Draven. This is the list that won the entire event, and for the first time I feel like I can say this is pretty min-maxed, and I kind of like what I'm seeing here, even though I'm not the biggest fan of a mid-range Draven. Overall has 6 energy, split, obelisk of power, reverse road, Targon's Peak. Very standard when it comes to locations. We have talked about this many times already, but what we can see in the main deck list is, first and foremost, we have 2 Brynhirs in the main and 2 Mind Splitters in the main, and we have 0 Ferris Forerunner in this deck list at all when it comes to the basic 40. And this is something I was talking about a lot on my stream, a lot during the videos about the previous Chinese tournaments, that I really don't like Ferris Forerunners in the main in a meta game where Rebuke is just played in every single purple deck. It just makes the card really bad. Like I don't want to play Ferris Forerunner against a single purple deck. Like, the card is just not good when you can just get bounced by Rebuke and you just essentially play a 12 mana do nothing card. Like, it's a really big problem. So I really like this build because it focuses on proactivity but also presents different kind of threats. Now, the only thing I don't like about this deck is the 3x Kai'Sa. Like, I just feel like with such a card draw that Draven represents, Kai'Sa is basically a 4 energy 4 might unit with accelerate, and the card draw is a little bit redundant. So this could be a little bit different. Maybe there could be just a second Draven instead of a Kai'Sa, but at the same time, you cannot go wrong with Kai'Sa. It's just a good card, and drawing cards is never bad. It's just the problem with Draven itself. He has too much card draw. But other than that, I really like what I'm seeing here because we have a very good toolbox of 2 drops. So we have 3 fans, 2 Titaners, 3 treasure hunters, and I feel like this is great choice because all of those units are doing something. Obviously, Treasure Hunter is the best when you draw it on turn 1, but the Titaners and Overzealous fans, even though you are gladly seeing them on turn 1 if you don't have a Treasure Hunter, they still represent a toolbox utility later stages of the game. But then when you start to think about it, that's one of the reasons why Draven is so powerful. At every stage of the game, he has threats that can be a toolbox as well, and he represents so many axes of attack, so many like vectors of how you can play this deck that it's super hard to play against it. Just think about it. This deck has everything. It has mobility, it has denial, it has bouncing, it has counter spells, it has, wait, does it? Actually, this deck doesn't really have even hard bargain in it. But it could have. That's another problem. Like, you have to play around hard bargain whenever they have 2 open, because you don't know if this list is actually playing hard bargain. But we have straight up removal with Falling Stars. We have the Ride the Wind, right? We have the Switcheroos in main as well. But then you have Edges of Night, so you have multiple hidden cards that can be like interchanged at the same time. This deck has every single possible way of attacking an opponent, or your opponent has to play around everything. When you play against a Draven, he has 2 mana open. You have to account for like every single trick in the book, right? There can be a Spinning Axe, there can be a Ride the Wind, there can be Rebuke, there can be Fight or Flight, there can be a hard bargain, there can be any kind of buff when it comes to red, so like against the odds, for example. But when the Draven has suddenly 4 energy open, and that will happen at some point of the game, then you cannot play around anything because everything can be played at the same time. Like, you are just incapable of making a great decision when your opponent Draven has 4 open, because so many combinations can be happening at once that better would be to just approach the game like this. I'm attacking a battlefield, my Draven opponent has 4 energy, so it would be just good to assume that 2 of my units are not gonna be in this combat. Like, they're just probably gonna die or be bounced or just return to base or something, and I essentially don't have 2 units. But the deck also has 2 Brainihears, which are great in mirrors and against other variety of decks, because it allows you to do that final push when you have to close out the game. So it's an enabler for that, right? And then we have 2 Mind Splitters, which are essentially the Ferris Forerunners, or in place of Ferris Forerunners. And this is a great choice because not only it allows you to be more efficient against rebukes, right, but it also delivers you important scouting against other Dravens, for example. You remember what I just explained with the mana open, right? Now imagine if you have a unit that tells you like 90% of the cards that they have currently in their hand, and even if they draw 1, you have a very select like options now. What do you have to play around, or how do you want to approach the next combat? So Mind Splitter is a great choice in mirror matches, but it also is a great choice against a variety of other decks, because if you play against Aurora, maybe you will be able to snipe out an Aurora at some point. I mean, yeah, well, let's just assume the Aurora deck had a little bit of misplay when it comes to ramping up. Anyway, the point is Mind Splitter is pretty decent, and it's much better than Ferris Forerunner. Another thing that I like about this deck is that, for example, there are some options when it comes to the metagame. Most Dravens are playing Obelisk of Power, but they are using it when they are going second, so you go up to 3 if you go first against that opponent, and the opponent goes to 4 and they drop a Draven. Now, with stack deck, you're capable of doing a turn 1 play like Noxus Hopeful, because you're going to be able to trigger the Noxus Hopeful Legion, and also there's a higher chance of actually drawing it because you have stack deck, and now you have a unit that actually represents 4 power and to some degree can fight against the other Draven. The sideboard choices also shows us that the player understood what his deck is trying to do and what he's trying to play against. We have additional copies of Ride the Wind, Brainihear, and Mind Splitter, which we don't really have to explain that much, but then we have 3 Ferris Forerunner in the side, which is a great choice against, for example, Victor, which has a lot of removal, but it doesn't have a clear way of dealing with Ferris Forerunner's Death Knell effect, like Rebuke, right? So we're gonna side that in against not purple deck, because now suddenly Ferris Forerunner is playable because Rebuke doesn't exist in the matchup. And then the 2 times against the odds is, I was actually misjudging this card a lot when it comes to my first impression before playing it, because now I actually find it myself useful against, like, for example, the Victor decks I already mentioned to some degree, because there's more mid-range versions currently in the play in the metagame, but also it's very good against the Miracle Dravens because they do stack a lot of units in certain positions, or like attack with a lot of units at the same time. So against the odds, suddenly has positions where it can deliver like 2-4, 2-6, which is great value. So overall, I hate to admit, but this list that won the entire event seems like a really good list, and probably is the current choice when it comes to how to play Draven. Second place Fiora is way different than the deck that we have seen in the previous Regional Open, even though it was also Fiora. This one is a baited hook deck. So we have leaning more yellow, we have 7 yellow runes, 5 body runes. Then the locations are also a little bit different, because we have Candlelit Sanctum, which is in theory helping a little bit with the baited hook. We have Druiding Tree because obviously Fiora struggles with draw, and we have Treferian Warcamp because it is a good combo with baited hook, but also it kind of works with, for example, Action and Fiora or Spectral Matron that are gonna go into Treferian Warcamp when I'm gonna be moving into it, because then they become mighty. Remember that just if you play a 4 might unit to Treferian Warcamp, it doesn't become mighty, because this is a static passive effect that just makes the unit +1 might. So when you play it, it was never 4 and becomes 5, it was always 5. The most important thing about this deck is that it doesn't feel terrible when you're not drawing the baited hook. It still feels a little bit worse because baited hook is your entire strategy, but it doesn't feel like you lose an arm and a leg when you didn't draw it. So overall, we have still power for creatures, we have the Fioras, we have the sets, which are like the engine of the deck normally. We have actions in the main which allow you to be a little bit more efficient with hate, which also buys you time to draw into the baited hook. Like, for example, if you have those specific matchups against other decks that have equipment, which I very much like I think action should be made when you play an orange deck if you have the slot, or you should make the slot for this card overall in this metagame. metagame. Now, when it comes to the 2-drops, we have way more 2-drops than your typical Fiora because we don't play the typical equipment that you would play in turn 1 and 2, like the Warmog or the Doran's Blade. There's only BF Sword in this deck, so they are being replaced with units because you need more units for the baited hook to work. You also have to remember that this deck really relies on the Fiora Worthy. You only have one copy of Fiora Worthy, and this might be one of the things that maybe could be looked at, because Fiora Worthy enables you to essentially make baited hook even better than in any other deck, because now when you play a unit from baited hook, you can ready them if they become mighty. So for example, whichever unit we play that is not Harness Dragon, we can then use something like a Death Grip Punch First or a BF Sword or even Call to Glory or even to some degree Riposte to untap the unit by making them mighty and sacrificing the yellow color to ready them, which is a big deal because suddenly baited hook becomes way more proactive and it allows you to be actually very aggressive with the deck that other baited hooks decks can't really do. In the sideboard, we're gonna find a third copy of Riposte, 2 Sabotages, 2 Challenges, and 3 Salvages. Now, one thing I don't like about the sideboard is that the one copy of Riposte is in the sideboard and not in the main, but at the same time, I do understand that it's hard to find space in this deck. Now, Salvage, understandable fully. Actually, all of those cards here are understandable. It's just about like which ones do you have in main, which ones do you have in the side, and that depends on your local metagame. So maybe in a different let's say meta, you would have 3 Riposte in the main because that's the only counter spell that can actually be used to protect baited hook in the entire game when it comes to the potential yellow decks that can play baited hook. Now, do I think that this deck is better than the Fiora that was in top 2 in Fuzhou? I honestly don't. I feel like the other Fiora is way more consistent, but at the same time, this one has a more high roll potential. So maybe for like a big event, this one is probably better if you are aiming to win an event. And also just remember, this is the only Fiora that did convert to top 64 and it went up to top 2. Right, so maybe the skill of the player also had a very big factor over here, and it's definitely not an easy deck because you have to understand your assignment when playing baited hook. It's very easy when you draw it on turn, whatever, turn 2 essentially, and you play it and you have an option every turn, but it's gonna be much harder to understand how this deck should work like without the baited hook, or how to play baited hook effectively later on in the later stages in the game. But at the same time, it is much easier to play a Fiora with baited hook than other decks because you're not hungry for power that much, because you have a natural like up ramp. I don't know how to even say it. Anyway, you're recouping the cost by using your Grand Duelist when other decks don't really have that option. So this is the 3rd place Ezreal, and I'm not gonna lie, I have never played this kind of deck, so I'm not gonna be an expert on it. I'm just gonna see and talk about what I currently see in this deck list. So this is the version of Ezreal that does play Pit Crew, the 3/3 unit that when you play a gear, you ready me. The entire combo is with Cool. When you play Cool, equip it to Pit Crew and essentially untap the Pit Crew. Then it goes to a location, conquers, creates gold, and that untaps your Pit Crew so you can go back. If you have Boots of Swiftness, you can go to the 2nd location, conquer again, create gold, untap Pit Crew, and go back. This is all because Pit Crew doesn't say card, it says gear. So, and because gold tokens are not cards, but they are gear, they do count towards Pit Crew. So maybe an errata is coming in the future, who knows. But for now this works. So it's a very cool combo, and this entire deck kind of revolves around it, but overall it's still an Ezreal deck that has a lot of options. So let's talk a little bit about it. So the battlefields, we have Hall of Legends, which kinda slightly mimics the power of the Great Dravens, so you can pay energy to untap your creature, untap your legend, sorry, to draw more cards. Then we have Veiled Temple, which allows you to untap your gear, which is nice in this deck because it changes your gold that you generate in the same turn, like with Card Shop over the Pit Crew and Call, to actually act as a seal because they can be used in the same turn. It also allows you to untap and detach the Call and the Boots of Swiftness if you ever need to do so. Voidgate is just Voidgate, like it's pretty good choice, and in current metagame, even though there's pretty significant amount of Kaisas, you're not gonna be running into them all the time. So Void Gate is probably more beneficial for you than the other decks that are going to be playing against. The deck plays 2 Ezreal Prodigies because even though you have instant access to Ezreal Prodigy as your champion unit, it's really important to have Ezreal in this deck always, almost, because you have so much potency with the cold shot, which suddenly is very consistent because you will have access to the Ezreal. We have the Frigid Touch, the Hard Bargain, and Bellows Breath, which also benefit from lowering the cost of the repeat choices, right? So this is a very big swing when it comes to efficiency, and this deck is power hungry. This is why we also have free sales of Discord. A lot of the cards are here requiring you to use power, but at the same time, even if they don't, they will have to be equipped, like Call or Boots of Swiftness, right? Even your champion unit requires you to have power. So because of that, we have a lot of gold generation. We have card shops as a free drop. We have the Call to, you know, combo with Pit Crew, but also just in case of emergency can be attached to something else like a card shop and create gold as well. Free seal of the Discord. And then one very important thing about this deck is the fact that we don't have 2-drops in this deck. We don't. Like, the only play that you're gonna be doing in essentially turn 2 resources is gonna be a stack deck and potentially 1 copy of Gust. You're probably not gonna play anything else. Maybe a Stupefy if your hand is really bad, which I don't know how this plays out. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if this is like strong enough to actually, it did take the 3rd place, right? But it doesn't seem like it's intuitive to play because you have a completely different mana curve. Essentially, it's all revolving around 3s and 7s, and then the reactive spells are essentially 2s and 1s. Like, this is very interesting, and I'm definitely gonna play to see how this deck kind of runs to understand it a little bit better, because the patterns that you will play are not that obvious like when it comes to other decks. Now, what are here some neat combos? Very obvious combos, like 1000 Tail Watcher and Bellows Breath is fantastic. It allows you to clear 4 HP, 5 HP units depending on how much you repeat. And also remember that with the Ezreal on the board, you're gonna be able to lower the cost of the repeat from Bellows Breath by either the energy or the power, which you can choose, right? So you will pay, like, for example, Bellows Breath will gonna cost you 1 energy, 1 power, but then repeat with Ezreal on board will cost you either energy or power, so you will make it 1, 2 or 2 and 1, which makes a difference when it comes to management of your resources, which I feel like is gonna be probably the main reason why you're gonna be efficient with this deck or not, and you're gonna look like a clown if you're not. So not an easy deck to pilot for sure. And then you also have to remember that the Prodigal Explorer has to jump through hoops and fucking ladders to actually draw a card, right? You have to target 2 units with twice. You have to target twice your enemies to actually draw a card, which is not that easy to do if your opponents might be just limiting the amount of units that they have, for example. Like that, there can be some situations like this as well. Other than that, we have the Mind Splitters, which again, a great choice just in the current metagame, and what it does to a deck that is like this, like is reactive, but at the same kind of proactive because of the pit crews, right? But when you have access to knowledge of what your opponent has in the hand, it changes the way that you're playing a deck like this, because you don't have to like think about now every single option. You just have to play around what the opponent has in the hand, which makes you play completely differently and changes the way that you're gonna play. Like your stack deck is gonna be looking for different targets, you know, like you're gonna have certainty. And one thing that I'm like, it's kind of sad that Arcane Shift is just used in 1 copy, but it does powerful stuff over here. Like Arcane Shifting your Mind Splitter, Arcane Shifting your 1000 Tail Watcher is incredibly powerful, and there are not many other targets that you would like to Arcane Shift, right? Because Ezreal and Card Shop are not that impactful when it comes to like recasting them, but Mind Splitter and 1000 Tail Watcher are nuts. And remember that you can actually use this because it's an action during combat. Can you imagine like when someone attacks your location where you have 1000 Tail Watcher and you go, oh, okay, let me Arcane Shift, blink my 1000 Tail Watcher, do a -3 and deal 3 damage. The card is very good. Anyway, In the sideboard, we're gonna have 2 ons to have more chunky units, a time warp, switcheroos, factory recall against some pesky instant quick draw equipment, most likely, and a 3rd copy of Bellows Breath. We also have 1 copy of Unchecked Power because this color doesn't have better mass removal, I guess. The 4th place is another mid-range Draven, and this one we're just gonna breeze through. It's just a worse version of the 1st place deck, in my opinion. Like the 2 first Forerunners in the main, like the Pouty Poro instead of a 2nd Titan, and like all of this just makes the deck less consistent. Not to mention the fact that it plays 2 spinning axes but 3 Edges of Night. I don't understand. I really don't. Like, okay, the only argument would be we want more hidden cards and we didn't have anything else to cut, and it's still like it's kind of occupies similar spots, but spinning axe is just so efficient. Like the other argument would be, oh, I don't want to get rebuked and that's why I play 2 spinning axes instead of 3. But yeah, I don't think that's a winning argument. And don't even start me on the sideboard. Like, bro, there's a 1 copy of everything here apart from against the odds. Like, yeah, I don't think there's a good direction. But hey, again, Draven has a very, very high skill floor, so you can perform even with subpar lists like this because it's just a Draven. 5th place, Irelia, is very standard, and I'll be honest with you, we talked about this deck so often in the previous Chinese videos that I feel like you could just go back to any of those and I will just repeat myself, you know? So essentially it's a VAP Irelia list with 2 Draven out dashes and a small packet of the units, so 2 Lonely Porous, 3 Tide Turners, and Stellarcorn Herders. 2 of those, I'm actually kind of, I don't know, is it enough in Irelia's to play only 2 of those? I feel like it's just so instrumental to the deck working that it kind of feels like, specific also when you have Tide Turners, you would just benefit so much if you had a 3rd copy of it. But again, I am not an expert on Irelia, but I do have other standard stuff over here: 3 Defiant Dens at Siren and a Boots of Swiftness, and I feel like you cannot play this deck without a Boots of Swiftness, but we have seen in the past Chinese decks that didn't play it, which I kind of questioned a lot. In the sideboard, we have 3 Sneaky Deckhands, and that's a sneaky beaky tech, so I kind of like this. I'm not certain in which particular matchups you would like to side this in, but I like the idea. And then there's the 3rd copy of Stellarcorn Herder here as well. 6th place is another Draven, and again, not much to say here, is just a subpar version of the deck from the 1st. That's about it. It has 1 first Forerunner, but at least it has the good selection of the 2 drops. We have 3 Kaisers, 3 Hopfuls, 3 Dariuses, 2 Brynhirs, 3 Spinning Axes, so that's at least something. And there are no capes over here at all. We have Cleaves though. I still don't know which one is better. Is it Cleave or is it Blood Rush? No clue, actually, because the breakpoints are not solidified in this metagame, at least from my perspective. So I cannot say which one is definitely better, but Blood Rush does deliver you more options, which in the long term, the longer you play the game, the better Blood Rush becomes, because you should be having more energy to just always give you that +4, right? So probably Blood Rush might be a little bit higher when it comes to the mathematic odds of mattering or not mattering in the matchup. And then we have a 1 hard bargain in the main, 3 Ride the Winds. Like, as always, like you don't know what you're playing against when you're playing a Draven, because they can have everything. 7th place is the deck that I have the biggest experience with, because it's a Miracle Draven. The list is exactly the same as the one from Bologna, where the Italians played it and it won the entire event. So Razas, Battering Rams, all of that, you know, shenanigans, Bashwak for the Alpha Strike. The sideboard is a little bit different than the original list from Bologna, because it does have Mind Splitters, additional copy of Rebuke, and the Against the Odds, which might be important, for example, in the mirror match, right? But other than that, it's all standard. The entire core of the deck is exactly the same, but there are 2 changes here that are also pretty significant, and one of them I did myself. Actually, both of them I did myself, but I didn't test it out too often with the battlefield. But first, let's talk about the mana. Chaos Runes and Fury Runes, we have an 8-4 split instead of the original 7 and 5, and I did that myself and I tested extensively, and I just like 8-4 more, because it allows me to be a little bit more aggressive with the way I spend purple on. So I'm a little bit more consistent with playing Rasas, with playing Ezreal, sometimes with the cost of you know, just really having a high risk, high reward play. And then you're gonna have to wait to get your energy back because you're spending too much. But I like that approach more than the 7-5 split because I was running out of purple. That might be just the personal playstyle. But this person also, this player over here in China, did make that choice. Now, the second choice that they made is also something that I tested, but only in few games. I don't have an opinion yet, but it's nice to see that someone else did the same change as I did, which is including Obelisk of Power instead of Minefield. And I like Minefield, by the way. I think it's a good battlefield location because it's pretty neutral. But Obelisk of Power also allows you to have like the problem with this deck is that if you need basically a 2-drop to make certain that you have a good start with this deck, right? But it doesn't feel like it's lost when you don't have a 2-drop. But when you're going second and you have the ability to play Draven with the Obelisk of Power, it makes it really aggressive, changes the way that you play the deck. You have almost like a guarantee that you're gonna have a gold, which or forces your opponent to not conquer a location, which is a big thing. Having that guaranteed gold, like because you don't rely on drawing the treasure hunter, changes the way that your economy works, and that might be big enough reason to play Obelisk of Power instead of the Minefield. Now I understand that opponents also do get the resource, but at the same time they're probably not going to be as efficient with it as you will, specifically also when you play in mirror matches. So I really like this, the Obelisk of Power. I need to test it myself more to have a more solidified opinion, but that was my own personal like perspective of why would I want to use Obelisk of Power instead of the Minefield, and I'm assuming that this player had the same idea. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put more effort into testing it with the Obelisk of Power when going second and see how that goes. Overall, in this Chinese event, like when I went briefly through the entire stats, it seemed like the Miracle version was more popular than Fuzhou. It still like was less popular than the mid-range version, but we did get more Miracle Dravens on this event than in the previous one. And then on the 8th place we have another mid-range Draven. Woohoo! What does this one have? 2 spinning axes. Oh yeah. But it also has 1 against the odds, but 2 falling stars. Like again, like it's just random cards being put in, and the random like that takes the cake here is Maddened Marauder, a card that is a 5 energy 4 might tank, maybe at some point that was actually mattering, that has a fight to flight built in, but obviously it's on a unit, so you're not gonna be playing it during combat. But it does allow to move a unit from a battlefield to its base. It can be yours, can be an opponent, which I mean, I don't hate the card, but how often was this useful when you have, you know, 1 copy of it? I don't know. Like, would I just rather have a 2nd copy of Mind Splitter and instead of the first one as a 3rd copy of Spinning Axe? Yes. Most likely yes, or just instead of a like Madden Marauder, just another copy of Darius. That would probably be a better choice as well. So again, you can just put some random cards in a Draven and just act like the deck is suddenly yours. And my god, I just saw the sideboard. I didn't, for some reason I didn't take a look before. Holy, like I don't even know what to say. It's 8 different cards, like some of them you have in the main, but holy that's 1 random copy of Dunebreaker, 1 random copy of Ezreal. Do we even know what kind of matches are we targeting with those cards? I don't have an idea. Like, I would have to sit down and really think hard, which matchups do I want to put in a Dunebreaker, and which matchups does Ezreal come in to actually matter? Is that the matchup where I have to play hard bargain that I have only 1 copy of? It's a little bit mind-boggling, you know, it's a little bit mind-boggling. But yeah, it's, you know, 8th place, great stuff, Draven. As a bonus, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the more interesting decks that I found overall in the tournament, but that's not all of it. But on the 14th place, there's a Draven list that combines the Nocturne version with your normal Miracle. So essentially, the deck works exactly the same. You see the same base. There's a Vi, there's Ezreals, Travel Merchants, Treasure Hunters, Overzealous Fans, you know, there's 3 Rasas, 3 Battering Rams, but on top of that, you also have 3 Noxus Hopefuls and 2 Nocturne. Essentially, this deck cuts Physis, for example, and 1 copy of Treasure Hunter, 1 copy of Seal of Discord, and that has to be missing something else over here, but overall puts those cards out to make the deck even more aggressive. And I'll be honest with you, I have no idea if this is better or not. again, you would have to test and actually play against a lot of matchups to make a certain call. Like, is this mathematically better than the normal version of Miracle? But it's definitely more proactive because you have like more aggressive choices, right? You can have some very explosive rounds that should be not possible otherwise, and you still have the access to the late game with the Rasas and the Bushwhack, of course, right? So it's an interesting deck. The two Falling Star here are in the sideboard, Fizzes as well, so they're just moved around, but including the Noxuses and the Nocturnes makes this deck a little bit more explosive. And because of that, you also have different locations. Instead of the Minefield, we have the Candlelight Sanctum. Zone Warrens is of course the best location that you can play in this deck, but then we have also Obelisk of Power that would be replacing otherwise the Talgon's Peak. I had to remember. Anyway, but yeah, it's an interesting approach. I will test it out and see if this feels better than your normal Miracle version, because it might be. Then on the 24th place, we have the highest place Victor, which is not your typical control all removal Victor deck. It's a little bit more honest units. So we have Honest Brokers. That was not intended. Plundering Poro, 1 copy, 2 copies of Card Shop, Faithful Manufactors, Lecturing Yordles, 1 Shen, 2 Freaks and Zaos, Thousand Tail Watchers, some Seals as well, because the deck is power hungry, but I'm not sure how I like playing 2 Seals. The same could be said about the Draven. It's like you want to have a Seal as soon as possible, that's why you typically play 3 of them, but they do become like kind of dead weight later on, and Draven has a way of filtering them from the hand, while this deck doesn't really have that option, so maybe that's why. But at the same time, you can still draw them in the late game when you don't really need them anymore. But yeah, other than that, the deck has removal, so we have Bellows Breath to combo with Thousand Tail Watchers, we have Call the Weak, we have Hidden Blades. Obviously Call the Weak is worse in this kind of deck than the removal based Victor. We have 1 back-to-back, didn't see this card for a while, a Console the Past, 1 Vengeance, 3 Imperial Decrees, because obviously you need it for the Bellows Breath, and 3 Singularities. In the sideboard, we have more copies of back-to-back, a Salvage, 2 Face Breakers, and 2 Grime Stratagem. The highest on took the 34th place, and it's a version of like your typical El Presidente deck, but also plays smaller units. We have Apprentice Smiths, Clockwork Keepers, a Sona, Stellacorn Herders, and 1 Tiana Crown Guard to deliver another win condition, essentially, apart from just Shurelias and the Emperor's Divide. So that's interesting approach to the deck building. I don't think this deck is very good, but hey, it's nice to see On at least perform with 1 deck out of the 19th, I think, that were in the entire event. In the sideboard is another copy of Tiana, and Janna, 2 Disarming Rakes, because they're just good in the metagame when there's so much gear, and more counter spells. The highest performing Kai'Sa was 37th place, and it's an interesting approach to deck building, because this is not your Kai'Sa that you would see in the S1 or even S2. It's a more removal based deck that has a lot of card draw. I mean, in general, you could say that about Kaisers, but this one is a little bit different. Units, you have a very limited amount of units. We have only Poros, we have Brandering Poros, Pouty Poros, Lecturing Yordles, and Watchful Sentries. This is it from the small units, of course, apart from the 1 Kai'Sa. And then 3000 Tail Watcher. Everything else is a removal card apart from the Time Warp and Retreat. So essentially everything here is just meant to remove the threats and establish some control with your smaller units and close out the game with 1000 Tail Watcher, essentially, right? But you want to win by just being a tempo deck, essentially. Now, Get Excited is an interesting inclusion in the main deck because the deck plays 3 copies of Progress. Now, I would probably argue that maybe playing 2 Progress Day and 1 Premonition could be a better choice, because Premonition is also a reaction speed card, which is an interesting, flexibility that you could have. And Get Excited is pretty decent card. Killing an opponent big unit out of the blue for 2 resources is really a really big thing. Like 3 Time Warps. Just imagine you attack with a Darius, you put a Cleave on it, and your opponent has 2 resources open. Like, what can he do, right? Not much. But then suddenly the Kai'Sa gets excited, discards a Time Warp, and kills your Darius for 2 resources. That is pretty neat deal, and when you play so much card draw in this deck, I feel like you can try playing the Get Excited. So that's a neat deck building idea over here, and I don't hate it. And also the locations are interesting because the deck does have battlefields like fortified position, which allows you to be, I'm assuming this is choice when you're going first, right? When you are able to establish control of this battlefield and just leave your 2-drop there that suddenly becomes a 4-drop, unless it's Watchful Sentry. Then we have Obelisk of Power, which again, same idea like with the Dravens. You go second, you drop the Kai'Sa, suddenly your card draw allows you to be also more excited. And Void Gate, because obviously when your half of the deck is removal based damage, Void Gate seems pretty good. The problem is that when I play Void Gate in Kai'Sa, I just don't feel like I'm getting a lot of value because the opponent's just avoiding it and going to the auto location, but at the same time that allows you to play a little bit different. So it's an interesting Kai'Sa. In this sideboard we have 3 Ferrous Forerunners, which is a great choice if you don't play against purple decks, right? So this comes in when your opponent feels like, oh wait, this deck doesn't really have that many creatures. So, and then suddenly 3 Ferrous Forerunner in the deck. We have 3 Rocket Barrage, which presents you redundancy, but in a good way. You have the way to destroy gear, but also it allows you to destroy units. But if you have a lot of resources, you can do both at the same time, or just do one but more efficiently. I think Rocket Barrage as a free choice in the sideboard is really a good direction for Kai'Sas, and there are 2 Thermal Beams as well on top of. Now overall, I kind of like this deck. I might test it out to see how it feels because I played a lot of Kai'Sa. I really like how it plays out, and this seems pretty cool. Like, so there are some certain matchups that might be feeling worse, like for example the yellow full removal Victor. I don't know if you can win this. I'll be honest with you. You might not be able to win that matchup like 90 out of 100, you know, and that might be a problem. But then that's why Ferrous Forerunner comes in, and that probably would, like, if you're drawing the Ferrous Forerunner, you're gonna be able to suddenly swap your odds into your favor, maybe even. So that's gonna be interesting. Again, I would have to test it out, see how it plays out. The highest Lucian was 42nd place, and it's a combo version. I hate it. I really don't like the Skyfall Arion Trinity Force combo. It does have 4 copies, so it's even less consistent than the other Lucians that play like a full combo of it. So I don't know what to think about it. It's the deck just feels like completely random. Like you have 1 action, like you have 2 Brynhirs, 1 Dune Breaker, 1 Doran's Blades, 2 Hex Drinkers, 2 Longswords. There's like, it just feels like it tries to do a lot of stuff at the same time, but you want to have your win condition, which is Trinity Force and Skyfall of Arion. But if you don't roll it, then the deck feels way less powerful, even though it does have 3 copies of Elantris Pursuit, which is one of the best cards in the entire game. But I don't know. I don't feel like the combo version of Lucian is the way that you want to play this deck, but so far in China it seems to be the most popular build of the Lucian. And at the end we're gonna have the 45th place Leona, 1 out of 4 that managed to get to top 64, and the journey ended there. But big congrats to get a top 45 with Leona out of 500. It's pretty neat feat. We have, I'm not an expert, maybe this is like a revolutionary build for Leonas, I would not know. But it does have a little bit more smaller units, like we have Solari Shipbearers, but there are not 2-drops over here. Yeah, I just realized the only 2-drops that we have here are Zonia's and Guardian Angel, and that's essentially it. So that you have 5 cards that you will want to drop on turn 1, and then essentially everything else is 4 drops and a 1 3-drop that is more reactive, so you want to play it with an effect. But there's Obelisk of Power, which essentially means that when you're going second, suddenly almost half of your deck is a 2-drop, so that's a difference for sure. Other than that, counter spells, removals, BF Sword, Twonks, but I don't know if actually Twonks are better than Prison, because I do think the limitation to only attacking is a big thing, and I think it's underplayed how big of an impact actually this limitation has. Because yeah, it does affect like a lot of scenarios that you potentially have in your games, and suddenly then it's a blank card. And if you don't have card draw, and this deck doesn't really have card draw, right, you might be looking at a problem because suddenly 1 out of 4 or 1 out of your 3 cards that you have in hand doesn't really do anything because you're not attacking, you have to go forward. Now, what I've seen also, some Leonas playing Emperor's Divide, and I like that. That's one of those cards that allows you to have a flexibility with this deck, and I feel like that's also something that this deck kinda lack. But again, I'm not an expert on Leonas, so take this with a grain of salt. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, and maybe a sub if you enjoyed and you want to see more reports like this and other guides that I'm doing on the channel. Bye bye.